it is always a pleasure to welcome you at the ventures organized by CEFRES. And today's topic is of great importance. This topic is important for Charles University as well, because I would like to tell you about one venue which was organized here and was devoted to the topic of academic freedoms and autonomy of universities. It was in September this year, 2021, when the representatives of university networks, Charles University is involved in, was organized here. And we were happy to have here Professor Michael Murphy, president of EUA, then chairs of important associations, Ludovic Tilly from Coimbra Group, president of Unicai, Luciano Sasso, president of LERU, Petelere, and also president of Europeum, Andrew Graham. The autonomy of universities in Europe was discussed, and there was a question mark whether universities in Europe and their autonomy is under the threat. We had here also member of European Parliament, Christian Ehler, who is rapporteur for the question of academic freedom in European Parliament, and European Parliament is just preparing a new resolution on the topic. And it was not only asked for by representatives from Central Eastern European universities, but also from Western part of Europe. This is not only the question in this part of Europe, but also there. And I would like to draw your attention to the declaration which was launched. It was very much connected with Prague Declaration #1, which was published already in May 2016, when on the occasion of 700th anniversary of the birth of King of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV. And it was already dealing with academic freedoms. And message from the heart of Europe, so-called Prague Declaration 2, was adopted and signed by these distinguished representatives of European University Association. I would like to quote from that global challenges need global solutions. An open society and free universities exist to serve the common good of humankind. Our students, yet the young generation, are key to overcome the challenges of the future. Autonomy, freedom, humanism, open-mindedness, and respect to the otherness have been the basic principles and values of universities in Europe throughout their long history, and they will continue to be in the future. These values, together with top research and higher education, are the common ground for creating the future of global society. This is our mission.
It's a privilege for me to be again attending the second part, in fact, of this debate, which has been organized jointly by the CEFRES and Charles University and the Czech Academy of Sciences, because it's a special year. It's a special year for CEFRES because it's the 30th anniversary of its foundation and its presence in Prague, in the Czech Republic. As you might know, France is having a network of research institutions around the world. In fact, we have 27 research institutions, such as CEFRES, mainly focusing on social sciences. But in fact, we are one of the countries actively promoting, also through this network of research institutions abroad, the very concrete spirit of academic freedoms all over the world, and trying to pursue this goal, and in the long-term perspective, but also showing or leading by example, if I can put it this way, on academic freedoms. We had a first moment last May, and our Minister of State for EU Affairs, Clément Beaune, attended this moment. So the CEFRES organized the first conference on power, knowledge, and academic freedom. And today it's a little bit the second part on is academic freedom a freedom of all? And so I'm very happy that today we will have the opportunity to discuss not only on academic freedoms between researchers, but also to have a debate between researchers and non-researchers on what it means or how important our academic freedoms are. I should also mention at this point that as a priority for our future French presidency of the Council of the EU, we have asked our network of research institutions around the world, so the 27 equivalents of the CEFRES, to carry on studies on the state of academic freedoms in their respective countries, and also to have, exactly like we are having now, vivid and lively debates on, and open debates on the state of our academic freedoms, not only in our old democracies, but also in areas where those freedoms are much more challenged. That's also a strong part of, let's say, the priorities that we want to promote during the French presidency of the EU Council next year. We will be focusing on three priorities: the recovery for Europe, a stronger Europe, but also the sense of belonging. And among the elements that are in the sense of belonging are, of course, the values of democracy, the rule of law, and what goes with it from many, many years since the Enlightenment is the question and the topic of academic freedoms. So I'm very happy, and I will stop because diplomats always tend to speak too much, but I'm very happy that we can have the second part to this debate, and to have it between, I would say, specialists of academic freedoms or representatives or researchers of academic freedoms, and also non-specialists, non-researchers, students, to discuss in a very open way of the state or the situation. I think we have to have also our eyes wide open, as the situation, including in Europe, is not that good, and we have to face it. It's not just to criticize or to say that we would be better in some countries or other places, but we have to acknowledge that there is some fundamental freedoms here that are at stake. That it's not only a professional freedom, but it is also a freedom that could be qualified as a public good. And that is key for researchers to be able to freely carry out their research without interference. But it's also an essential element that the researchers, the teachers, are able precisely to teach, to share in an environment where they will not feel constrained by political, religious, economic pressure. And sometimes we see that it is more and more difficult to go against, for example, the mainstream, or go against social media, or to face political pressure, even in some European states. We had excellent testimony of what happens in a neighboring country of this country by the rector Ignatieff of the Central European University when we had our first debate. And I think this has to be put on the table also. We know that there are researchers outside Europe which are either in jail, either under surveillance, and that cannot express their views freely. And that's an element that we have also to protect and promote. And we have also to acknowledge and to recognize that in the digital age, the role of big platforms is also, in a way, shaping trends. When you look, for example, at search and data mining, the way algorithm design or go in terms of the preferences when you look for some research or for some references, this is also having an influence on the way we think or shape our research. So my main message is it is a public good and it is not granted. Even in democracies today, it is not granted. And we are also facing external influences, some to prevent any kind of debate, some to orient or to give orientations to those debates in certain very clear dimensions. And so we need to, support, foster this freedom as a treasure, but a treasure that needs to be alive. As this treasure or these freedoms allowed, or that all that we are today allowed to do. Without academic freedoms, there wouldn't have been the Enlightenment. You would not have seen all those progress in mathematics, natural sciences, philosophy, economics. And so we, let's say, as Europeans, we have this in our background. And I think we have to make it clear and sure that we will be able to preserve this freedom.
I'd like to address two issues, if I may. First, CEFRES itself, and then the topic of the current conference. So first, let me congratulate to CEFRES to the 30th birthday. Wow, what an accomplishment. I want to share a quick personal recollection. At the Oriental Institute, my home institute at the Academy of Sciences, we have had a long cooperation with CEFRES, at least since 2013. That year, we actually prepared together a rather big international conference titled The Protest Movements in the Contemporary Middle East, which we then organized in 2014. And basically, thanks to CEFRES, we were able to invite top scholars, not only from France, but also elsewhere. So it was a very nice conference, and the collaboration with CEFRES was just brilliant and very professional. Ever since, I've been following CEFRES quite closely. I was particularly happy when it received a new home at a facility within the Czech Academy of Sciences. And I would like to believe CEFRES finds it a hospitable and inspiring environment. I'm also happy that the Czech Academy of Sciences joined forces with CEFRES in another endeavor when we launched together an incubator program called Tandem, which is bringing, I think, very interesting results and serves to the mutual benefit of both institutions and hopefully beyond. In any case, I believe CEFRES has much to celebrate, and I wish it many successful years ahead. Second, let me briefly touch upon the topic of today's conference, and let me applaud you for choosing it. Now, as a scholar of the Middle East, I find this topic particularly important. For sure, in general, it has many aspects, and I'm certain you will cover them all. In the part of the world that I study, the Middle East, there is unfortunately a rather worrying situation when it comes to academic freedom. And unfortunately, here I'm not talking only about the freedom of speech, but basically all the freedoms. This situation affects both foreign scholars doing research in this area, but of course, even more local scholars. Scholars are being arrested, silenced, beat, detained for prolonged times, or in some cases, even far worse. It doesn't even have to be a criticism of a given regime or a research into a sensitive subject, which can lead to one's persecution. We have examples of scholars being persecuted quite arbitrarily. In recent years, the so-called terrorism or cybercrime charges proved to be a very efficient weapon which can be easily abused and applied to basically anything. So these kinds of charges serve as a powerful tool for silencing any voices, including the innocent ones. Of course, the Middle East is not the only example of abuses within the academic field. We don't have to go that far to find various restrictions, although usually not that harsh. But still, I'm truly happy that you decided to tackle this important issue, and I wish you all well. And I think we should give our thoughts to those academics worldwide who do not have the luxury of speaking up openly. Thank you.
So that being said, we can never talk too much about academic freedom, in fact, both outside the academic world. So I will come back to this later, but within the academic universe itself. Because within the research community, academic freedom is considered to be the very principle of the modern university. This is a principle that the scholars have appropriated, internalized, to the extent that they rarely attempt to reflect on what it is and on its content. In a way, scholars talk about academic freedom in critical context when academic freedom is under attack, in a way. And I think it's the case today in many countries and contexts, from Belarus to China, from Poland to Hungary, and also for different reasons within so-called consolidated democracies, as you said before, Mr. Ambassador. By the way, it's not certain, it's not sure that we all have the same appreciation, the same understanding of what academic freedom is or should be. The content and the scope of academic freedom vary from one context to another. And I think from an individual perspective, there is a certain consensus among us, among researchers, that this freedom, made of freedom, as said Georges Vedel, a freedom made of freedoms, the freedom to think, the freedom to teach, the freedom to publish, to express oneself, must be protected. There is a consensus about that. But on the institutional level, it's maybe a different matter, because there are different conceptions of the organizational form that best protects academic freedom. For some, for instance, the institutional autonomy of teaching and research bodies of universities is a sine qua non of protecting academic freedom. But for others, the attachment to the state is the very condition of intellectual independence. In France, for example, the autonomy of universities is sometimes thought to be contrary to the independence of individual researchers. In authoritarian states, one can think the rules of the market will bring them freedom, because the state, of course, cannot give freedom to scholars. So that raises the question of research funding. Should it depend on the state? Should it depend on the market? As, for instance, the new public management encourages it. Another debate concerns the acceptable limits of researchers' freedom. And as we know, freedom is never unlimited. It can be framed by laws, by several types of constraints, and above all, by peer review, by the contrôle des pairs. And the researcher is not omnipotent. And if he or she puts forward uncheckable phrases or appears to be a negationist, for instance, challenging the existence of gas chambers, to give an example, he or she runs the risks of being sanctioned. This raises the question of the legitimacy, of course, of these limitations. And from this point of view, it's easy to understand that the problem of academic freedom is perceived, is constructed very differently from one country to another and at different times in its history. Yesterday, Pascale, Laborier, and Pierre-Jérôme, Adjedj, and myself, we participated to debate on the same topic at the Viadrina University in Frankfurt upon Oder, on the occasion of the opening of their exhibition, Posing for Freedom. And the problem rightly came to the table. A Belarusian colleague and a colleague from the University of Donetsk in Ukraine, who are now in Germany, pointed out that the challenge for researchers in these countries is first of all to survive, to keep their job, to avoid prison. For other colleagues, like for instance in France, the issue is not the same. Let's give the example of the precarization of young researchers, which is a very important issue in France. So this problem exists, but there's no risk of banishment, and no risk of arrest in the French context. So we can see how the problem of academic freedom is conceived differently depending on the context. And I am sure that the differences of experiences and opinion will emerge during this conference. And that is good because it's also the interest of the conference like this one to provoke a debate. But I'm also sure that despite the diversity of situations and priorities, it is the same ideal that drives us. But I also believe that the key issue lies elsewhere, not so much inside the academic world as outside it, and above all in the relationship that researchers have with the rest of the society. And I think the fragility of academic freedom lies in its nature. So as you know, there are several conceptions. There's the, sorry to simplify, but the American approach, maybe it's a very intuitive approach, which makes academic freedom a part of the free speech. In this conception, it's a human right, like any other human right. But in other countries, like in France, it's not considered as such. It's not a human right as another one, but it's more a right that all men or women cannot enjoy. It's more a privilege attached to the community of researchers themselves. So it's a professional freedom. For Olivier Beau, for instance, academic freedom implies a certain enclosure of the academic world, an enclosure made necessary in order to be able to think the world. And because of this, it's a freedom that is little known by the general public, which does not feel directly concerned by the challenges of academic freedom. First, a part of the public is aware of the importance of creative freedom for art, for instance. They know what freedom of the press means, but most of people are not aware of what academic freedom is. So I think the challenge is to succeed in preserving a right, a freedom that is clearly, let's say, corporatist in a way, while reclassifying it, requalifying it, as you said before, Mr. Ambassador, as an essential good, a common good for the whole society. I think this is an urgent need, but it's not easy to do so in order to deconstruct the image of an elitist academic world debating outdated issues. And I think the arguments are on the table. We have all the arguments we need to do so. We can say that academic freedom enables the education and the training of young citizens, our students. It helps also to build a critical knowledge for the adult citizens, let's say. It's also a place for inventing, creating words, new words to describe the world, to describe the issues that the world face. And it's also a condition to produce a knowledge which is based on a critical distance towards the profane view on society, let's say like that. University, as well, in certain contexts, it was the case, for instance, during communism in Poland and also in Czech Republic, is also a place for democratic dissidents to raise. So this brings another problem. How can we convince the society to be interested in and to protect research and make it understand that their freedom, our freedom, the freedom of researchers is also the freedom of people, without giving society the right to interfere inside the academy. For instance, the media, the newspapers, they have their courrier des lecteurs or their mediator. They offer programs in which they answer to critical statements by the public. So there is this dialogue between media and the public. This dialogue doesn't really exist between the academia and the general public. So maybe here there is an issue also to talk about. It's even more difficult for social sciences and humanities because we are producing a knowledge which is not considered as esoteric for people, as, for instance, a physician or someone who managed to send a robot to a planet very far away. So most of people think that they know, and of course they know about their own experience. And we see sometimes some politicians, for instance, to present themselves as historians, and they are not. So the issue is not only to protect academic freedom, but it's also to promote academic freedom. And this is, I hope, what we are going to do or to try to do during this conference. So I really want to express my warm greetings to all the participants, those who came here in Prague. People online maybe don't see, but we are surrounded by guests and also public and CEFRES members. So I thank everybody about their presence tonight. There are guests from different countries in Europe, but also elsewhere. So thank you very much to be part of us. The first panel tonight will be dedicated to a debate. The title of the conference is Academic Freedom, a Freedom of All. And tomorrow there will be 4 panels covering different aspects of this topic. So I'm giving now the floor to Pascale, Laborier, and Pierre-Jérôme Adjedj.
We should present first the film screening, if you want, and maybe we can present some perspective of that movie with Pierre-Jérôme.
Effectuer des recherches en toute liberté, les publier, les diffuser, voyager. Tels sont des droits que les universitaires réfugiés ont perdus dans leur pays, parmi d'autres, quand ils ne sont pas emprisonnés, torturés ou exécutés.
But I am the exiled. Seal me with your eyes. Take me wherever you are. Take me whatever you are. Restore to me the color of face and the warmth of body, the light of heart and eye, the salt of bread and rhythm, the taste of earth, the motherland. Shield me with your eyes. Take me as a relic from the mansion of sorrow. Take me as a verse from my tragedy. Take me as a toy, a brick from the house, so that our children will remember to return.
« 18 août 2015. Palmyre. Al-Assad, c'est le nom du directeur des antiquités et des musées. Il est exécuté publiquement. Scène insoutenable de sa décapitation. Il a 82 ans. Crime de guerre, crime culturel. Palmyre, Tombouctou, Samara, Bamiyan.
برایم بخوان محمد، میخواهم برگردم، از دره سرازیر شوم، روبروی مزرعه گندم باشد، درختان زردالو و گلهای خشخاش. پیرمرد شاهنامه بخواند، زن چراغ را از ایوان به اتاق بیاورد و ما خیره به شعله. بس کن، این قصه کسی را به خواب هم نمیبرد. باید جایی تفنگی سرفه کند، پایی پژمرده شود، مزرعه‌ای بسوزد و ما شبانه بگریزیم از برغس تا قندهار، از کویته تا مشهد.
Turquie 2016. Les universitaires signent une pétition pour la paix. 822 procès. Inculpation pour crime, pour terrorisme. La moitié d'entre eux perdent leur poste. Ils n'ont plus le droit d'exercer. Certains sont emprisonnés.
Things weren't as smooth as it is now in the last couple of years, especially after losing my job and blacklisted by my government in Turkey had been pretty harsh. Losing everything I've had and every dream that I was pursuing had been a cornerstone. Then I had started to understand how it really feels to be the other. Not being able to work or not being able to receive a healthcare services made me think of all the others of the world. The struggle of the refugees is real. It is all around us. To me, it is essential and obligatory to show solidarity with the people who are looking for a ground to be exist.
El exilio nos exige una evolución. Es necesario transformar estos sentimientos negativos en pensamientos de esperanza, optimismo, dedicación, mejoramiento personal y profesional para demostrarles al mundo la calidad y el potencial que tenemos como profesionales, fortaleciendo así nuestra mente y espíritu.
J'ai réalisé combien c'était dur à supporter pour les parents en 2017, quand j'ai été contraint moi-même à fuir mon pays en laissant derrière moi mon épouse et nos 3 enfants. Le plus jeune des enfants était âgé de 2 semaines. Je savais que ça pouvait être la dernière fois qu'il me voyait et vice-versa. Moi et mon épouse étions conscients que même si je parvenais à ne pas me faire arrêter ou assassiner, il était difficile de savoir après combien de temps nous allions nous revoir. J'ai réussi à fuir et me suis exilé en France.
En agosto de 1975, a pocos meses de terminar mi formación como profesor de español, fui detenido por segunda vez, acusado de ser un potencial extremista de izquierda. Nunca fui juzgado de nada. Sin embargo, estuve detenido durante 18 meses. Fui liberado a fines de noviembre de 1976, cuando se cerraron los centros de detención públicos. Para estar seguro de salvar mi vida, tuve que aceptar una visa ofrecida por el gobierno francés para viajar a Francia y pedir el refugio político.
Lorsque le dictateur exploite toutes les capacités militaires, économiques, humaines et autres du pays pour fermer la bouche et tuer le peuple, il n'y a pas d'autre choix pour l'homme que de fuir jusqu'à ce qu'il s'échappe et ne se transforme pas en un instrument pour tuer les autres. Voici mon histoire et l'histoire de nombreux Syriens fuyant l'enfer du régime. Si vous ne pouvez pas nous aider, au moins ne soyez pas le partenaire du criminel.
5 juin 2019. Arrestation de l'anthropologue Fariba Adelka à Téhéran. Elle refuse de renoncer à ses recherches. 1 an après, elle est toujours en prison, à Evin, comme d'autres otages scientifiques, d'autres nationalités. Restreindre la liberté de parole, contrôler les recherches, ce sont là les symptômes d'une démocratie en péril. La menace frappe les universitaires qui exercent dans leur pays, mais aussi ceux qui y séjournent. C'est alors notre responsabilité de réclamer la libération des otages scientifiques. C'est aussi notre devoir de solidarité d'accueillir nos collègues en danger dans leur pays, leur donner la parole quand des pouvoirs autoritaires les réduisent au silence.
À l'époque où mon père est arrivé en France en tant que réfugié politique chilien, il lui a fallu se débrouiller seul pour reprendre le cours de sa carrière universitaire. Œuvrer aujourd'hui à aider les scientifiques en exil à poursuivre leurs travaux en paix est ma façon de me battre pour un monde meilleur, sans haine ni violence, comme mon père me l'a appris.
Ouvrez-moi cette porte. ouvrez-moi cette porte où je frappe en pleurant.
L'exil terminé, il reste, au-delà du sombre souvenir des dictatures, une blessure ouverte, la disparition forcée des personnes. Les mères, les fils, les épouses, les frères attendent encore des nouvelles de ses proches disparus par les forces militaires des dictatures. Mon frère, musicien disparu en 1978 en Uruguay, vit encore à travers les souvenirs et la musique de ses amis exilés dans le monde. Quand ils ont commencé à disparaître, comme l'oasis dans les mirages, à disparaître sans dernière parole, ils tenaient dans leurs mains les morceaux des choses qu'ils aimaient. Ils sont quelque part, nuages ou tombes. Ils sont quelque part, j'en suis sûr, là-bas, au sud des lames.
Liberté, opinion, se réinventer, créer, produire, croire, faire confiance, avenir, espoir, enfant, vivre, enfant, vivre, vivre.
But it's linked to the academic freedom, because if you have not academic freedom, or your freedom is limited, so you are at risk. But sometimes all that story tell us that you don't know sometimes that you are at risk because you did anything. So, for example, we have a colleague in Germany. It was many years ago now. It was a demonstration in Tehran, and a recent journalist wrote her name that she was making a demonstration, but she wasn't. It was he didn't translate her name. So in one night she was suddenly a risk. So. And we are many researchers. We are Catherine Gousset, for example, Michel Bosson from the CEFRES here. We are working about that history on forced exile during the 20th century, and what were the programs to rescue the ideal person. But to rescue is not the good word, because nobody wants to be rescued. They won't all make their job like all of us. So with Pierre-Jérôme, we met, and that thing to be an exile researcher with a limited freedom, it's something invisible in our university, because when you are a descendant or a tourist somewhere, there are a huge mobilization. But after that, when we invited our colleagues here, they are invisible, because they are normal always, so they are normal researchers, but not really, because they are not job here. So we wanted to make visible something what is invisible, and it's a co-creation with exiled person themselves. So Pierre-Jérôme, perhaps you want to present that?
Yes, maybe just one word about the film, the movie, because we made it in a particular context, because it was in April 20 during the first lockdown, and the project was stopped. We had made quite old photos, but we had to make more, and we couldn't work on the exhibition. Then we made this movie, and yeah, and for me it's strange to see it again after this time, now that we have the exhibition. And yes, the first idea was the idea from Pascale, because she had this idea that we had to make these people visible. And she had the great idea, in my opinion, to make a project, artistic project with it. And when she asked me what I would do if I had to make portrait from people in exile, it was a really difficult question because because you have to show something that is not visible, because how do you define that on a portrait that a person is in exile? And my first thought was that okay, what we want to show is not the exile itself. We want to show the person, and maybe the whole person. I mean with a big history, not only with the present, with the exile, but also with the past and a future, of course. And that was the starting point to think about it, to think what should be these pictures, and then we discussed a lot about it, because I didn't have any idea about the condition of the people in exile, and especially the researcher. But of course, I live in Berlin since 11 years, and I saw in 2015, of course, a massive arrival of people from Syria mainly, but Pascale had to explain me a lot of things, and I understood slowly what it was about, and then we came to the idea that we should show more than the person itself, and the idea was to show pictures from the. Sorry, my English is worse than my German.
They should. So we ask that they. So we don't. Because the exile situation, what is it? It should not be a frozen situation. It should tell the story where you are from. So you should take a picture from your country or your city or your house, what you want, where you arrive, where you were. So a second picture, something from your research, because you are a scientist also, to put something in them, and a personal object, what you think. So we asked the people to bring things. Sometimes they were able to bring only 2 things, sometimes too many things. And Pierre-Jérôme created a mirror.
Yeah, because the thing was that okay, we got the idea that we had to show several pictures in one picture, but the thing was I didn't want to make any Photoshop or something like that. I wanted to make everything on the place with the person at the moment, and I had a great ambition to take it just in one picture. In one picture, I could have several layers, and then I created this system with a mirror on with rolls, and that can rolling, and then the idea was to make a long picture, 4-second picture. Between 2 seconds, the mirror reflects a photo, a picture, and the object, personal object and object about the research field. And then I put off the mirror, and during 2 seconds, it's very long for a portrait, of course. They had to remain still, and we had a second photo in big size behind the person, and it made these several layers with transparencies. But someone asked me, why didn't you make simply a double exposure? When you make a double exposure, you have the same amount of feature on the two sides. With this system, it's totally unpredictable. What will from a corner to another in the same picture, it's totally different how the transparencies occurs. And yeah, and then we got this this result, and after all, I understood when I saw the exhibition in real life with the big picture. I realized that this long exposure, it was a technical need, but it brought something very deep from the person, because I've seen that the eyes of the person was very strong, and some of them told me, oh, I didn't realize that I gave something so strong, so deep, and I think it's part of this part of the process, but I didn't expect that. It was I understood that after. Yeah.
So we can speak a lot about this exhibition, about that portrait. If you have any question, we can speak after the conference or show you something more. But just 2 points, what are very important for, because there are also ethical point, is that we don't want to treat our colleagues like exotic animals. So the point is, we were photographers ourselves with the same situation, and we photograph also people who are colleagues who are invited, scholar or tourist or exiled person, because we are thinking we are in the same world. You know, it's not symmetric because we didn't experience the same situation, but to try to do that. And also the colleagues make also an intervention in the picture. They look the results of Pierre-Jérôme, make modification, and they sometimes you see the result. It was the idea of the photographed person herself. That's very important. And we discussed a lot before to make a picture with colleagues in such situation. Is it a good idea or not a good idea? What do you think? And sometimes in the book, the picture are cut because we don't want to put some colleagues in risk more than they are, for especially the Uyghur colleagues. So it's good. It's a good topic to give the floor to our other colleagues with engaged to the civil societies. I give the floor to Dilnur, Reyhan, because you are president of the European Uyghur Institute, and it's that topic of academic freedom, not only a treat, but also what's happened here. It's a very important topic too.
Thank you to invite me to talk about academic freedom. And I am, of course, as a Uyghur and as a scholar of Uyghur origin, I want to talk about the freedom of academic freedom, especially in the Uyghur case. And I recall here the Uyghur situation, as you know, since 5 years, there is a genocide committing by China against Uyghur people, and it's a genocide, ongoing genocide, and especially it started from late 2016. It started by attacking the scholars. The first target was scholars and notables and other Uyghur representatives of Uyghur society. And of course, before 2017, 2016, it was already very difficult to study, to do research on non-Han people, non-Chinese people in China, especially on Uyghurs and the Tibetans. It's all and Uyghur topic is the most taboo topic in China. And also, it's you know all that the freedom of speech in general in China is the one of the worst country, if we can't say worst one in the world, and especially on the question of Uyghurs and the Tibetans, as you see in the map. This Uyghurs and Uyghur region and the Tibet region is the most important parts of China today. And I recall also China today and communist China only inherited Qing Empire, an empire who colonized Tibet and China and also Inner Mongolia and other parts. You can see in red. They call in China autonomous regions, and so that's why the topics on minorities, especially on Uyghurs and Tibetans, are very, very taboo questions in China, and there are many problems also in the diaspora just before and since just before 2016, and since 2016 it's worse, and since 2016 until now we have more than 400 Uyghur elites. Most of them are academics, disappeared. Some of them they already died in concentration camps. Some of them they are condemned to death. This is the case of especially academics like Tashpolat Tip. Three academics is especially renowned internationally. Especially Tashpolat Tip is a geographer, very important researcher, and also ex-president of Xinjiang University. He was sentenced to death, and Tashpolat Tip we talked most in France because he is also a doctor honoris of Sorbonne University, and also we have asked to raise his situation in France, but Paris city has refused because he said that Sorbonne is not in Paris city, so we can't talk about, or we can't do anything about this academic. And another one is the ex-president of University of Medicine of Xinjiang. He was sentenced to death too, and he was very linked to the University of Bordeaux, because since 20 years there is a contract and development programs between Bordeaux, University Bordeaux, and the University of Medicine of Xinjiang on the question on the research of Uyghur medicine. And Halmurat Ropur, researcher Halmurat Ropur, was sentenced to death. And Halmurat Ropur received French scholars, French medicines, French colleagues from Bordeaux since 20 years. And he was origin of this program, exchange programs. And none of our colleagues from Bordeaux said something for Halmurat Ropur, and we don't know. There is a rumors that Halmurat Ropur is already dead in concentration camp, and none of them accept to say something. This is a question, a terrible question, and also another one is Raila Daoud, international novel anthropologist, very rare specialist on Uyghur culture and the tradition, and we don't any news since 5 years. China keeps silent about her situation, and we don't know if she's alive or not. And this is the only several cases of for more than 400 Uyghur scholars. And also, in this question, I wrote in the name of European Uyghur Institute. We sent emails, requests to all research centers and also all university presidents of France to ask them to do something to declare their solidarity with Uyghur scholars who are disappeared, who are in concentration camps, but none of them, they replied positively. Until now, only one European university, it is my university too, it is Belgium, in Belgium, l'Université Libre de Bruxelles. It is the only university who published motion expressing their solidarity with Uyghur colleagues and condemned China and called China to liberate, free our colleagues. This is it. And also I asked to presidents of every French university to do something at least for the diaspora, Uyghur students in the diaspora, because since 5 years, most 85% of Uyghurs, they have any connection with their families, and Uyghur parents, they can't anymore send money to support Uyghur students there, because sending money is one of the reasons to be arrested and be detained in concentration camps. And only one accepted. It is the research center in Brest, because I know the director of the center. He accepts, and none of other French universities responded positively. This is our solidarity, academic solidarity. We are talking about academic freedom, and there are a genocide targeted firstly our colleagues, Uyghur colleagues, and since none of our university accepted to express their solidarity, and none of them accepted to facilitate also the university life for Uyghur students in the diaspora, because I asked to accept Uyghur students from Turkey, because in Turkey the situation is very, very severe for Uyghurs also, and I asked for French universities to accept at least young Uyghur students from Turkey. None of them they accepted. This is the reality, and we are talking here, most of us French. Some of you are. You have the responsibilities in the universities and in the centers. You are directors. And we are talking about academic freedom. Can you? And for other, and on the question of on China, this is the situation before the genocide, and this is journalist, and it's very difficult to do field work before already on Uyghur question for the journalists and the scholars. And since 2015, journalists and the scholars were detained foreign, and it's impossible for Uyghurs or Chinese to do these topics. And this is a French journalist. This is first foreign journalist expelled from China for writing an article about Uyghurs. And Peter Dahlin, one of the Swedish scholar, he was detained and forced to confess in Chinese television. Like others, several other foreigners also, to ask pardon to Chinese population, and CCTV broadcasting this first first to say this j'oublie le mot. Confession. The first confessions, CCTV broadcasted in English, in French, in other languages in European countries. And London, UK last year expelled CCTV from UK for these reasons. And what you guess? France accepted. They are now in France after expelled from UK. And after 2017, after 2017, we have also the situation is worse, of course. Censorship. We have just before also we have censorship, auto censorship in European countries. I talk from on the research and the researchers on democratic countries like European countries, and until 2017, 2018, the Chinese arm on the scholars was the visa question. Many scholars they don't dare to talk about sensible questions on China, especially on Uyghur questions, because they are afraid of not getting visa to China. And you know what, in 2018 until 2019, we have scholars in Francophone, French-speaking countries. We have published in Le Monde, in Belgium, in Swiss, Le Temps, the main newspapers in Francophone countries. We published op-eds to condemn Chinese regime and the country, and we asked the close of the concentration camps, and we asked all Francophone colleagues on China studies. When we started, we were very few because many colleagues, they refused to sign with us because they told us openly they're afraid of to not getting visa to China. And also another question also is on Uyghur studies. Until 2018, most of the 90% of the scholars on Uyghur studies, they refuse to talk about the colonialism on Uyghur questions, on Uyghur studies. They refuse. When we talk about this is a colonial situation and colonial relations between the Uyghurs and China, they refuse to talk about it, and that they think this is exaggerated or radical position, etc. And you guess what? From 2018, all scholars on Uyghurs, or even not on Uyghurs, the Chinese scholars, they now all talk about colonialism, and they start, when they talk about Uyghur studies, they start by speaking the colonial situation, colonial relations, to explain the origin of the conflict. And I think one of the main reasons of this situation, this change, is I think maybe it is fear of not getting the visa to China if they talk about colonialism, because since 2017 the Uyghur region is totally closed. That's why now none of the scholars they can go to do anything in the Uyghur region. Maybe some of them they can get visa, but they can do nothing because Uyghur region is the state in the world most surveyed zone in the world, and that they can't talk to Uyghurs anymore. And other question was also yeah. And another question is very serious question. Also, there's attacks on scholars and attacks against scholars and students by Chinese students in our universities, in French, Canadian, American, and other European countries. Chinese students attacks scholars and the students who critiques China, who speaks in a conference on Uyghur situation, and also the influence of Chinese influence in the universities is criticized now more and more. Just in France recently, there is a very heavy report on this. Heavy influence of Chinese in French universities, especially, and the French think tanks. And you have several examples here, and one of them this year, Antoine Bondas, a China scholar, French young scholar on Chinese studies, especially specialized in Taiwan studies. He was insulted by Chinese ambassador in Paris, like very crazy Ina, and ideological troll, small-time thug, and the dog, etc., publicly in Twitter. And also, and he is constantly attacked, and he's one of the example, and by the Chinese students and pro-Chinese activists in France against him, and me too, of course. And also, there is another example. Also, that's why, and I would like to say, most of the universities now, since COVID, use Zoom. Zoom is the application, the platform is in the service for the service of China, for the service of all dictatorships. And we have many examples. I hear just one example of the Reyhan, an Uyghur American scholar, and in Yale University. One of her talk in Yale University, Ontario University, I forgot. She was attacked on Zoom. The conference, she could not continue because the Chinese trolls, they made on the screen fake news and bullshit, like you can see it on the screen. And also they put the Chinese national anthem during the conference. And also that's why I refuse totally, and I encourage it since 1 year. I encourage all my colleagues to refuse to support this Zoom, this application, this platform for the service of the dictatorships. And it's all apart academic freedom. And also other examples, and one of my intervention, my conference in Strasbourg University was sabotaged also by Chinese students. They insulted and attacked the organized main director of the Department of Chinese Studies, and they shouted at her and threatened her to report her to Chinese consulate in Strasbourg. And also during our conference, Chinese consulate, they sent 2 people in our conference. They sabotaged our conference in the time, and then they came also with their propaganda books in the university to distribute to students. And and there are also another case of in Queensland University in Australia. One of the Australian students, Drew Polo, was suspended from the university because because of his activities for Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Hong Kongs for the freedom of these people in China. And he also criticized the Chinese influence in Australian universities, especially the Confucius Institute's role in Australian university. And that's why I asked for all French cities, all French mayors to sign a solidarity chart that I asked to sign. And in this, only 15 or 20 French mayors, they signed this chart. Most of the mayors, they refused for one reason. One of the articles of this chart is asking to stop the financial support to the Confucius Institutes in France. And because with the public money, French cities, they finance Confucius Institutes, and these institutes is the tools, propaganda tools of China in France and elsewhere. And also
just a question, because we are also here in Prague. What is the situation about because you speak a lot of French, but what is the situation in Prague or in Czech from the Uyghur people or scholars? Is there some mobilization here in this country? Where we are?
Scholars.
Yes.
We are very few, and one of the very good question, because most of the Uyghur scholars in the diaspora, they are anonymous. They publish anonymously. They don't, and it's very complicated to the conferences because they don't want to be appear, and especially since COVID, it's a very huge problem with them. That's why most of them we can't know their names because they don't want to give their names. It's the same thing for the Uyghur filmmakers, photographers, artists. They don't want to give their names. It's all anonymous. And also sanction. And also one last thing. Also the sanction against. Can we give another? Yes, another one. Sanction on the this one. Voilà, this one. Because of the concentration camps and the Uyghur genocide situation, European Union this year sanctioned four Chinese politicians responsible of crime against humanity in Uyghur region. And to response, China has sanctioned scholars, research centers in Europe and the UK, and also 10 European politicians. And you can see here one of the, especially my colleague Adjedj's very prominent German scholar on China studies, and also Joan Smith-Felley, UK British scholar on Uyghur studies, and Merrick's, the top research center for Chinese studies in Europe and in the world. And also just we saw on the slide just before, last thing is collaboration of publication houses with Chinese demands. And in 2017, just before 2017, Springer Nature, and also the Cambridge Publication House, Cambridge University Public Press, they accept to delete all articles related to democracy, related to Hong Kong, Taiwan, Uyghurs, Tibetans, inaccessible to Chinese public. And they accept the demand of Chinese government. And after the petitions and the reactions in the world, Cambridge had renounced it, but Springer Nature, they said they will continue to accept Chinese pressure because they have many interests in China. And this is a situation. And also, according to the report, and also I also witnessed also with, for example, one of the research think tank center of Lena, one of the top university in France, Lena, École Nationale d'Administration, their geostrategic think tank. They also there are some people collaborate with Chinese regime and do the Chinese propaganda on Uyghurs. But since 2019, in face of so many proof and researchers, now they stopped their propaganda, Chinese propaganda. But as you can see in front of China, the situation of universities and also of academic, we can't speak of academic freedom. We even refuse to support the colleagues, and even we fear to condemn concentration camps. How we can speak here academic freedom? Thank you.
Thank you, Dilnur. You stress a very dramatic situation about what we can describe as a genocide, and it's not only the solidarity, but also with the people who are detained and are dismissed there in China. And I think the Uyghur Institute have a lot to do to mobilization. So I don't know how it's here in your country, but in France, it began last year to sensibilize about the major firm about the trade with China and the university, and perhaps after the conference we can talk how to mobilize colleagues or university. Perhaps if nobody answers to you, perhaps we can think about another way. But actually there are a lot of attacks, and today, last week was the Belarus situation, the topic. And perhaps I give you the floor, Olga Golubko, because you are manager of emergency and assistance program for the Office of Education of Belarus.
So yeah, I'm representing the Education Office for New Belarus. This is a non-governmental organization that has started after the election 2020 in Belarus as a response to unprecedented violence and repression. Could we still have these QR codes? Because on the left you can scan a code and it will bring you to our website. Unfortunately, it only has the Russian version, but Google Translate creates miracles nowadays. So you can learn more about our office, what we do. And on the right is my contact. So if you will to show solidarity with our students and need more information about how you can do it, drop my message and we will discuss it. I'm also very glad to be here today in Czechia, because Czechia is actually one of the countries in Europe with a very long history of academic cooperation with Belarusian academic community. And naturally, it was one of the first countries to respond to what is going on in Belarus and opened the universities and its programs to our students, and even admitted our students from medical university. You know, it is very difficult to transmit a student from one country to another when we are talking such specialties as medicine or law, but our students who were expelled from the medical university were admitted here in Czech, so I would like to say thank you for that. As all you know, after the rigged elections 2020 and after the wave of violence that followed, Belarusian people took to the streets and protested against falsified election results and violence. And the academic community naturally joined the protest from the day zero. And especially in September, with the start of the new academic year, students took to the street just to be violently arrested by the police. So it started immediately, and already on September 4th, I suppose, we've seen riot police in the university, inside the university, arresting people just for expressing their political views in the place, which is actually, you know, which should be a safe place and a place for freedom and for free speech. Even before the election, Belarusian students and educational workers have been under constant danger of COVID infection, as the local government undertook next to no preventive measures. So students actually began to protest that even before August. I am proudly an alumni of our Minsk State Linguistic University, and a fellow student who was loud and clear about university taking no measures to prevent the disease to spread. She was expelled from the university for some non-existent reason. And in September, of course, it was already clear that this situation requires an urgent response in order to ameliorate the humanitarian crisis in education, and in the long run to begin a strategic debate of the future of Belarusian education, because at that time we were all full of hope, you know, and believed that we could start the change today. So we started our work with the education office, started our work in November, and our two main goals were first to establish an emergency program to help students and academics, but also other workers from all education levels to somehow get help in that situation. But also our goal was to work out the transition process, because we wanted to think about what we should do after the very happy day that will come, of course, and will come very soon. I still believe in that. So there are measures that we can, because of course now in Belarus, you cannot do anything. You cannot restore academic freedom. There is no freedom in society. We live in the constant situation of state terror. So we cannot talk about academic freedom or any freedom at all. We are witnessing a violation of basic human rights. So to restore academic freedom now in Belarus is non-possible. But I would like just to mention a few numbers. I know some of the colleagues already are familiar with that, but maybe others and those who are watching us online will be interested. So since September 2020, almost 500 students were detained. 200 46 students were expelled for political reasons. 52 are charged in criminal cases. Talking about the academic staff and professors, 177 professors faced pressure, and among them, almost 1/4 came from Belarusian State University, the leading university in the country, and the only research university. 12 rectors of universities and academies were dismissed. We also witnessed different types of persecution by the Minister of Internal Affairs, like fines, administrative arrests, prosecution in criminal cases. On the part of universities, there were non-renewal of the contract, which is a very popular way to make people shut up. Coercion to dismiss and dismissal. What we see in this slide is actually the situation in Europe in 2015, just before Istanbul conference. This map shows Bologna process in Europe. There is only one country that hasn't joined Bologna process in 2015. And what I see here is a very isolated country in Europe in a very abnormal situation. Because we see that all our neighboring countries that share our infamous history of being part of the USSR, this post-colonial, or some researchers would say post-socialist situation, they already joined the European Common Educational Space, right? And my idea is that this is a late isolation. It came, of course, from inside the country. So it was supported by the Lukashenko government and his ministers. But also, this isolation is exactly what makes dictatorship and terror possible. Without solidarity, without cooperation, without academic exchange, you're going to witness what we are witnessing today in Belarus. And here's another map on the other slide. Could you change the slide, please? And here again, it is very abnormal situation. This map shows global levels of academic freedom in 2020. So left to the Belarus, a little smaller country is Lithuania, where I live now, and cannot go back home. In Vilnius, we have a Vilnius University, which is just 200 kilometers away from the Belarus State University. It's 2.5 hours ride on train in bad old times. And we share a common history with Lithuania. We have, again, a long common academic history. Vilnius University was once a very important institution for my country, for Belarus. So what makes it possible that two universities, there are just 200 kilometers between them, but one has academic freedom index close to 1 and the other close to 0. Could we see the next slide, please? And this is like the global map. And you can see the countries who proudly share same category as Belarus. And surprisingly, in 2020, sorry, last year, actually the situation in Belarus was worse than in China. And I suppose this is because of the scale of the repression and what we faced. Because literally there is no free university, there is no academic freedom in Belarus nowadays. Our academics, our students, educators live in constant fear and the situation of state terror. What can be done? Right? The question that is where we are very interested in. It is pretty obvious that it is not possible to work inside the country, even though some guerrilla organizations still operate there, and some people still are fighting for their right for free teaching, free expression, freedom of research, etc., etc. They constantly got fines. They are living in this fear of being arrested, persecuted, but they still talk about it. And this is very important. And what we can do outside the country, because I now have the privilege to talk freely. This is my first time I'm talking as a representative of the education office. This is something, and I worked there since November 2020, almost actually a year. For a year, I haven't had this possibility just because I was in the country and I wanted my work to be continued. I didn't want to be arrested for what I do. So as I had this privilege, and as all of you here have this privilege because you live outside this red dot on the map, you know, we are now in countries where the situation is much, much better, not comparable. So we can show solidarity. We can also accept students from Belarus and other regions, of course, where academic freedom is basically non-existent. We can simply help each other and cooperate with each other. Today, I'm wearing this jersey with a beautiful young man, Artem Boyarsky. Artem Boyarsky is a 19-year-old student of the Belarusian State University chemistry department. He's a brilliant young man. He was awarded 4 scholarships from the Presidential Special Fund for the Support of Gifted Youth. And in August 2020, he publicly refused to accept that scholarship that bears the name of Lukashenko. After that, he was detained for the first time on November 2020. And he was basically hijacked from the campus, from the dormitory, and then sentenced to 15 days in prison. He was then released, and he discussed with his family whether he should leave Belarus. And his decision was to stay, because he's a compatriot. He wanted to continue his studies in what he believed is the best department in that country, and he wanted to work for that country. But on March 25, he was arrested again. And on a state television, a video appeared where, again, he was making a confession. Yeah. They have like a handbook of dictatorship or something. I don't know why it is so similar.
Solidarity between dictators.
Yeah, maybe they share more solidarity than we yet. So he was confessing to be an administrator of a Telegram channel called My Country of Belarus, which gave them the reason to charge him of forming an extremist formation. On Monday, his trial will begin. And that's why I'm wearing this jersey, and that's why I want to show my support. And I just want to show that we know and we still are fighting for Artyom. Moreover, we in the education office started a campaign of patronage, and Artyom Boyarsky was actually already admitted, even though he's in the pre-trial prison in Minsk. He was admitted to Kaunas University, and he will be able to continue his studies immediately after he will be released. And as I already said, we have more than 40 students, political prisoners. And on that picture, we see 12 of them, students, a teacher, and an activist. All these young people were charged of what is called a student case. They were all sentenced to 2.5 years in prisons for expressing their political views, for fighting for freedom on their campuses, and for being part of Belarusian Student Association, which is the largest student association in Belarus with a almost 20 years long history. So 12 people were arrested in one day, which is now infamously known as Black Thursday. But about 100 managed to escape from the KGB. And they are continuing their work. They continue to advocate for Belarusian students and Belarusian universities. And one of the campaigns that they have, and we also were their partners in that, is to make universities in Europe to cease their partnership with the administrators of Belarusian universities. Because surprisingly, even though we show so much solidarity, and this is true, so it is unlike the situation in Dilnur's country. We really cannot say that Poland, Lithuania, Czechia, Latvia, Romania have established special programs for Belarusian students and admitted them even when the academic year began. And the European Commission also established a scholarship to support our students and academics. But surprisingly, we see that lots of universities in Europe continue their cooperation, so-called cooperation with Belarusian universities, even though they know that to work with, say, administration of Belarus State University means to work with people who testified against students who later were sentenced to 2 up to 2.5 years in prisons for nothing, for being normal people and good citizens, for having a political position and views and expressing them freely, which is normal, right? So we had a small conference with the vice rectors of German universities, and I'm very proud to see that the University of Bremen was bold enough to finally publicly announce that we will cease any partnership with Belarusian universities, with the administrators. Because of course, students and educators need this cooperation. It just have to be done in different ways, because how it is done now is just a corruption and supporting dictator. I really believe that other universities will follow this brave example. I understand that it was a harsh political step for Bremen University, and I'm really proud they were bold enough to make it. So I would like I'd like to mention a few other programs of support we have at our office and in partnership with other organizations. So one of them is the patronage program, which I already mentioned. We would be very glad to know that some universities in Europe would be glad to admit our students, even though, symbolically, it will show a lot of support. But most of those people are really brilliant students. Like, they're academically absolutely ready to enter any university in Europe. It was just their choice to study in Belarus, So I don't see any reason why it might be a problem. Another thing is this service, which is called Politsekmi. I don't know whether you can see it, but there is a website, politsek.me, where you can make friends with political prisoners, with any political prisoners in Belarus. We have almost 1,000, actually more than 1,000 of them. But I, of course, especially would like to mention those 40 plus people who came from the educational sector. It's very simple. They have very nice instructions what you can do. It doesn't take lots of time. Make a short video or a picture just to keep it, visible, just to talk about it, just to dedicate 5 minutes of your time to make some other political prisoner from Belarus visible and to support them and show your solidarity. Also, another very important program of Politsekmi is becoming a godparent of political prisoner. So it's like a higher level of showing solidarity. It is also a symbolical gesture. I think all of people you can see on this picture already got their godparents, but it's a good thing. It doesn't have to have any limits. It is mostly, I think now most of them are from diplomatic corpus, but I'm surprised that there are no rectors, for example, vice rectors of European universities. I think it would be really nice to use your visibility to support someone from Belarus who is fighting for academic freedom, who fight it so hard that ended up with, who was fearless. Again, if you are interested in any of programs, you can contact me. I will then maybe ask you to show the first slide again, but not now. So in conclusion, I want to quote one of the students. She's actually in the lower right corner. It's Jana Arabejka. I want to quote her final speech during her so-called trial. Jana said, "Today, I mark 8 months from the date of our detention. We, 12 promising young people, spent 243 days in a pre-trial detention center, in a place of twilight, fear, and horror. Surprisingly, in this darkness, there are moments of happiness and joy. And these moments were created by people, relatives, acquaintances, and those whom we did not know until that very summer." Jana then told who she met in the pre-trial detention center, how they communicated, and what they told each other. She said, "Someone taught me how to make face mask out of handy tools. Other person tried unsuccessfully to teach me how to dance. And someone gave me the best birthday card ever. In short, these are completely different people. There are many of them, so many that I cannot tell about everyone now. And each of these people is a hope that a better future is possible. I'm grateful to each of them. For 8 months, I have met many different people with different preferences, principles, and ideals, different faiths. And these 8 months of regime activities could not convince me that fear destroys trust and everything without which a healthy society can exist and function. Therefore, and for 100 other reasons, my last word will be freedom.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me at this very special event. And I feel honored to be part of it. And I feel very humbled, actually, because it's almost impossible to add anything and to speak after the most moving film and personal testimonies on behalf of the whole communities, nations, and academics around the world. So I know it's really late in the day, and I will try to speak very briefly to provide a couple of comments on what has been said so far, and I will try to summarize it in 5 minutes so that Michal Vašečka can also have a short presentation, and that people still can enjoy the reception afterwards in the building, which, as you said, is my alma mater. So very special greetings from Cardiff to Prague to everyone. I think from what we've heard so far, it's obvious that freedom, academic freedom, is very specific and at the same time very universal. It's inseparable from freedom in general. It's part of the academic gene to be free, to have the liberty of academic research and independent thinking. Ever since the Middle Ages, universities emerged as institutions granting freedoms. At the same time, they required protection of these freedoms from political power. It's no coincidence that the first state university emerged as early as Middle Ages in Naples, after universities in Padua, Bologna, Paris, Oxford, Cambridge. Very soon, the powerful of this earth recognized the importance of academic independent thinking and discoveries. And when I was listening to these really disturbing stories and pictures of repression of freedom, academic and other freedom, it not only reminded me my own studies in the late 1980s in communist Czechoslovakia, but I immediately thought there could be other stories told about these autocratic and totalitarian governments, how much they can use and abuse academic research done independently. So obviously there are hundreds of universities in China that promote research into artificial intelligence, digital surveillance, into all sorts of military technologies. And it's clear that autocrats of the world want academic output. But this output is impossible without freedom and independence. And, or if it's done on a selected basis, of course, it harms academic freedoms, but at the same time, it also harms political system that cannot compete. Just think of the competition between in the bipolar world between communist Soviet Union and Western Europe, United States, simply because academic freedoms could deliver much more independent science and technologies and education. So why am I talking about this? Because freedom and academic freedom, of course, we know is incorporated into Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union. It's Article 13. But from what we heard, we know how closely it is related to freedom of expression in general and freedom of thought and conscience in general. So academics are humans, and academics therefore require this general freedom of thought and general freedom of expression to do their job. And so freedom is not some principle outside academia which would regulate it. No, freedom is the very intrinsic part of what we do on daily basis. And of course, it is measured by outcomes. This is so-called consequentialist argument. One most distinguished legal and political philosopher, Ronald Dworkin, said, freedom of expression is valuable in society in general because of the benefits that it can deliver. One of the benefits is good science and independent science and education. Let me conclude, because I don't want to speak too long, that we academics have responsibility for our freedom independently of the states under the jurisdiction of which we have been working. So we need to share responsibility for this freedom with people in the countries in which these freedoms are not granted and are being breached on daily basis by autocratic regimes. This means that we have to share this responsibility and support academics who are working in the conditions of unfreedom or who are suffering from torture and persecution. These are extreme examples, and there is no excuse for failing to do so. There are also more subtle examples of the lack of freedom and autonomy, which is also defined by access to information and exposure to suffering from disinformation. I want to mention something which has been mentioned in opening speeches, that academics are exposed to disinformation, fake news, and they are being mobbed by the public and they are by some public and they are being threatened. Even in free and democratic societies, academics are threatened by violence, by social ostracization and by all sorts of persecution by the public. That's why we even started Journal of Controversial Ideas in this country, in the United Kingdom. Access to information has to be shared. That's why we should support open access, and that's with all academics around the world, and that's why freedom of academic research, which should be granted, also means the free dissemination of scientific research outcomes, and by dissemination I mean dissemination in all countries, poor and rich, because what we face around the globe today is very unequal access to scientific research. So I would want to stop here, and I know that after listening to very fundamental and disturbing presentations from China, from Belarus, after learning about persecution of academics in countries of the Middle East or Latin America, our problems of guarding academic freedoms in free democratic societies sound so marginal. Nevertheless, this is all connected because science has always been universal, and socially it's been global. So we have to share this global responsibility. And here I want to stop because time is high, and Michal Vašečka is waiting to speak.
I'm really honored that I can speak about our experiences with academic freedom on this conference. I'm very sorry I was not able to come to Prague. Prague is not that far away. However, I was in Banska Bystrica. I was teaching today. And in spite of the fact that there is a lockdown in Bratislava introduced since this midnight, I was teaching face-to-face. So unfortunately, I wouldn't make it to Prague. And after all, lockdown in Slovakia, we have not only because the COVID situation is tragic all over the place, but also because after those who were kidnapping Slovakia and change it into mafia state. Unfortunately, rather unprepared people for governing the country came to power, and now this is a result. First of all, I understand we are running out of time. I don't want to take too much of your time. I received an information. I will be presenting soon. I received an information that I have 12 minutes. I will try to stick into it. And I was asked to reflect what we are doing in Slovakia as far as academic freedom worldwide is concerned, and to inform our respected colleagues in Prague what actually you can do from the position of a small think tank in order to help scholars at risk from other countries. Let me mention very briefly my background. I'm a sociologist who is sitting on various chairs, and just for the purpose of this conference, I will mention academia on one side. The second is think tank community, and also I'm a representative of Slovakia at ECRI, European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, which is one of anti-discrimination bodies of Council of Europe. So that's my human rights dimension. And as for my presentation, let me open it now. I'm not sure whether you can see it at the moment. Yeah, is it visible now?
No. Yes.
Now, very good, very good. So let me just repeat what kind of instruction I've got. that it would be very interesting for our colleagues to hear something about Scholars at Risk Network Slovakia that we established almost 3 years ago, and which was, by the way, the first Scholar at Risk network in Central Europe, somehow miraculously, bearing in mind what's the situation of academia, how far behind other universities in Poland, Hungary, or Czech Republic, Slovak universities are, behind. It's almost a miracle that we made it. I'm not going to pretend that we have fantastic results. This is definitely not Norway or Sweden, but modestly we are trying to push forward the whole thing. But before that, let me mention, before I will come to Scholars at Risk, let me mention, because it's something about Slovakia, just in 2 or 3 minutes, because we heard quite dramatic stories about Uyghurs, about Belarus, and I'm puzzled to always hear these things. I'm following what is happening worldwide, thanks to the whole network Scholars at Risk. And academic freedom obviously is endangered in many countries in the world. What we see in Afghanistan today is heartbreaking, how women cannot participate anymore in the life of academia. Speaking about countries such as North Korea, it's useless, it's dystopian totalitarian regime. But even former democracies such as Modi's India went as far as intervening into curricula of very concrete professors at very concrete universities, which is something we didn't hear about in former Czechoslovakia for the last 32 years. Or, even to mention our neighbor Hungary, where gender studies cannot be studied, cannot be lectured, because simply gender studies are on a so-called blacklist. So all these stories, of course, are heartbreaking. So what's the situation in Slovakia? First of all, before I will come to Scholars at Risk Network Slovakia, generally speaking, I can say that academic freedom is secured in Slovakia. As far as advancing knowledge in research and scholarship, academic freedom includes the right to freely communicate, etc., etc. But the question is rather whether academia does not need assistance from outside to open itself toward impulses from outside. And I believe that, yes, academia has been changing into basically closed group of friends systematically in the last 32 years. And the question, who is producing knowledge in Slovakia in 21st century? I must say that as far as social sciences are concerned, it's definitely not academia anymore. It's becoming still more and more group of think tanks, non-governmental organizations, and even paradoxically business, which is closely cooperating with people from academia, but they are working outside of academia in order to pursue high quality research. And let me mention what happened in Slovakia very recently. There is a struggle between universities and the Ministry of Education about academic freedom, basically, because there is an amendment to the University Act being prepared, which, let's make a long story short, is trying to minimize the power of academic senates and is trying to bring people, to first of all, to establish so-called executive boards at the universities, as it is the case in any university in the United States or Britain or many other places, and to put some people who would be representing ministry, which is, of course, highly problematic. Vast majority of universities are trying to fight back. And let me remind you the story, and that's very similar story to the Czech Republic, of course. Usually, senates consist of 2/3 of employees of the university and 1/3 of students. Those students, unfortunately, not always understand completely flow of money, needs of the university in its complexity, and very often, I don't know what's the situation in the Czech Republic, but in Slovakia, very often they are manipulated, sometimes corrupted, sometimes just blackmailed. And the result is that in many universities, including the one which is well known, Comenius University, rectors of the university are being elected in a highly problematic way, and also the whole control of, let's say, flow of money is highly problematic. So state, on one side, state desperately needs to control its money. That's definitely the case. But at the same time, once there will be somebody from the ministry who would be part of the executive board, that might be a nice person within a liberal democratic regime, which is this government in Slovakia is trying to pursue. We can trust them in this, but potential interference can be seen, as highly problematic when the democratic regime might be endangered in Slovakia, and that might come very soon. So suddenly Slovakia is in between a rock and a hard place. Something should change definitely, because the academic freedom was, and now let me surprise you, so widespread that many people in academia, unfortunately, were misusing for their very utilitarian purposes. And also that's why Slovak academia looks so tragically bad, even in comparison with the Czech Republic. On the other hand, to allow Ministry of Education to do these steps, we might prepare the floor for enemies of open society that might come into power very soon. Okay, this is the situation in Slovakia. I don't want to go into details later. We can open a discussion if you want, but let me somehow fulfill what I was expected to do, to say something about SAR network, how we established it. We were negotiating with SAR. We started negotiations some 6 years ago, and it was absolutely obvious that in case of Slovakia, there cannot be some leading university which would be leading the whole show. So our institute started negotiate with various universities. The situation was dramatic. I mean, sometimes even funny how some universities didn't even want to hear anything about potential refugees. But still, we established the network. The truth is, those are not the, I would say, pearls of Slovak academia. It's, let's say, Banská Bystrica University, small liberal arts college where I'm teaching as well, Bisla, which is part of Ecolas, then Trnava University, and also Pan-European University in Bratislava, which is a private university. And we basically started our network. We are the coordinator. There are certain working groups. We put those universities together. In the future, we would like to create also some student section. And it's really group of willing. The aim is to create a section that would address all relevant universities, but some of them are still reluctant. Comenius University is one of the best examples of it. Sometimes the oldest universities in a country are the biggest problem in this sense. SAR section is working not only on securing presence of scholars at risk in Slovakia, but we are trying to promote ideas of academic freedom and also responsibility, accountability of Slovakia to help those who might be in need. So let's say we organized the Freedom Festival in May 2019 before pandemic, which was very successful. We are organizing seminars, workshops in all these universities. There are several seminars and lectures, also by people from New York City and from Germany, and also by very concrete scholars at risk. Let me give you examples of two of them, one from Turkey and the other from Zimbabwe, who was talking about corruption, which was which was fun to come from Zimbabwe to speak about corruption in Slovakia, which is famous for its corruption. But the truth is that, many people who were following this discussion realized how important it is to help people who might be direct victim of their work, because concretely Prosper Maguchu, who was lecturing on corruption, he's a scholar who is studying corruption as a scholar. So just to finalize, our goal is achieving the stage when we will be able to target demand of universities and move out from this humanitarian aim of the initiative. And this is something what we want to awake. And also let me mention that SAR Slovakia coordinator, which is our institute, is financing mobility of experts. I must say that and it's just a coincidence, simply let me reveal unpleasant truth in this sense. I simply have a rather rich friend of mine whose parents also came to Czechoslovakia years ago from abroad, and he's willing to finance scholars at risk from abroad who are residing at those small universities that you saw. Of course, this is not something what is sustainable. But at least it gave us a chance to start the work of the network in a situation when otherwise, to fundraise money for these purposes from, let's say, European sources or international sources is basically close to zero. The chance is close to zero.